Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Physical Digital. For the last time, the Physical Digital... do that again. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Physical Digital Tiny Room for the last time. Welcome back to the Physical Digital Tiny Room for the time being, because Ben is going back to Italy. I am Michael of Michaelandbenjaminspodcast, and I am joined by the man who has been called the Black and Tans of Irish podcasting. It's Benjamin. Say hello, Benjamin, you black and you tan bastard, you.
That's the best one we've ever done.
I mean, realistically speaking, we should re-record that intro, but I don't think we're going to do it. I think we'll probably leave it like that.
I am an awful loyalist bastard. And was recently let out of a cell in order to go terrorise Catholics.
All I'm saying, Ben, is that intro is not going to attract any new listeners and hopefully won't alienate too many of the old listeners. Benjamin, do the theme music.
Theme music for the podcast. We don't actually have any theme music, but I hope someone will make some up for us. I don't wanna name any names. Rachel, I hope it's Rachel.
Very good. Consistently amusing.
Yep.
Benjamin.
Yes.
There's kind of a toss-up this week for what's the biggest pop culture news.
Go on.
So, Joker or Captain Marvel? Which one do you think was the bigger pop culture news?
Well, I'm going to say in terms of outrage, it was Joker. In terms of excitement and hype, Captain Marvel.
All right, we'll do Captain Marvel first then, Ben. Ben, if you remember, the trailer for Captain Marvel came out last Tuesday.
Last Tuesday.
Which is very poor planning from Marvel when it comes to taking into consideration podcasts which are recorded on a Sunday.
Yeah, they really have let down that demographic, and I feel that many people who record a podcast on a Sunday will actually, send a backlash of feedback their way.
Yeah, because it might as well have been 1,000,000 years ago that we watched the trailer for Captain Marvel.
In pop culture time, it has been 1,000,000 years.
Yeah, stop punching your microphone.
I punched the mic, I'm sorry, everybody.
Benjamin, we watched the trailer for Captain Marvel on the Lou bus.
The Lou bus, which is Dublin's premier public transport facility. The Lewis. Yeah, we got off work, Michael. We went. We don't always travel home together. For any listeners that might be equating that Michael and I skip home together
every day. No, we don't. We don't.
He only does that with me on my birthday. When I really ask nicely.
Or
when I come back from Florence.
Trailer release days.
Trailer release days. Hand-holding trailer release days.
Ben, enough of this skit. Let's talk about the film. Well, Ben, are you enthused about the Captain Marvel? Do you think?
Hyped.
You're hyped, are you?
I am looking forward to it. I enjoy that Nicholas Fury is back.
A young Nicholas Fury.
A bloody police officer Nicholas Fury by the looks of things.
No, he works for S.H.I.E.L.D.
Special agent Nicholas Fury. Are you sure that S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't come about as a result of...
100% sure, because S.H.I.E.L.D. already exists from the 40s.
Is that not the RSS?
The SSR, the Special Scientific Reserve.
Yeah, but it's not S.H.I.E.L.D.
It became S.H.I.E.L.D. in Peggy Carter's time.
Oh, okay.
It was already S.H.I.E.L.D. by the time of the 80s because that's when they built the evil Armanzola computer.
Big old war games.
Also,
Matthew Broderick Armanzola.
Also, Michael Douglas worked for S.H.I.E.L.D. in the 80s as Ant-Man.
Noted former husband of Catherine Zeta-Jones, Michael Douglas.
Yes. No, he's still husband, isn't he? They're not divorced.
Are they not?
No, they're still together.
I think they are.
No, I don't think they are.
All right.
I think he wanted Catherine Zeta-Jones to play the Wasp.
I'd quite like if Catherine Zeta-Jones was single. I would quite like to see Catherine Zeta-Jones as the Wasp.
She's pretty old now, Ben. I don't think you'd be that into her anymore. Hey, stop looking at Catherine Zeta-Jones on your phone.
Hang on, you've made a derogatory statement towards Catherine Zeta-Jones. Catherine Zeta-Jones was, in every sense, a formative experience for me when I went to see 2000's Zorro.
So very good when
Antonio Banderas, and Catherine Zeta-Jones is a sexy Spanish maiden.
Yeah, and he sliced her dress off a little bit.
Sliced her dress off with a Z. Never get away with that in the current climate.
No, that would be sexual assault now. No. Ben,
I'm sorry, you're completely wrong there, Michael.
Those pictures, Ben, those pictures are from the late 90s.
Okay,
that you're showing me.
Hang on. No, January is not a great time. Hang on. I'm going to say today, on the off chance that someone will upload a picture of Catherine Zeta-Jones.
Just in case there's a whole gang of creepy Ben types keeping an eye on Catherine Zeta-Jones.
To be fair, not divorced. You're right about that.
I know I'm right
You're
about
right
that.
about that. You're right about that.
Ben, can we please stop talking about Catherine Zeta-Jones? Let's focus here.
When Michael goes off about buddy Christina Milian, we sit there and do a whole podcast.
Or
on
Michelle Pfeiffer.
Pfeiffer.
Yeah,
The Fifes.
that's when I talk, not when you talk, Ben. Benjamin, what did you think about shooting lasers from her hands?
It's a bit generic, but it is her traditional kind of thing.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it has always been the worst superpower you can have.
Look, I think she's just going to be a big old powerhouse. I think that's the whole thing, isn't it? She's just able to
Do whatever she
cut through the
do.
bullshit.
She shoots lasers from her hands, not unlike the GoBots.
Yeah, classic GoBot
Yeah,
reference.
and the and the GoBots. This is going to be one of these episodes, is it?
These episodes, damn right.
The GoBots, Ben, it always looked like not a lot of imagination had gone into them. So someone had said, "How are they going to fight each other?" And then someone else said, "Lasers from their hands."
Lasers from their hands. What
And
else?
I don't know. I just think lasers from the hands are not very visually appealing.
Well, I'm assuming she's going to go through her little hero's journey. She's going to get knocked back down to earth. She's going to be depowered for a bit.
It's nice that you said that in a kind of condescending way. Is that because she's a lady?
No, not at all. It's because it's a bloody generic Marvel film.
Right, go on.
And it runs the risk of doing that because they did it with Thor, they did it with Captain America, they did it with bloody Tony Stark.
Yeah.
You know, flying too close to the sun, you get a little slap, come down to earth, and you climb and build yourself some
Do you
wings
think
again.
that's what it's going to be about? I don't think that's what it's going to be
Not
about.
entirely, but I think it's going to be more about, oh my god, I was kidnapped by the Kree, I'm actually a human.
Yeah, it looks that way, doesn't it?
And it looks awfully like that.
She's going to realise that the Kree are bad eggs.
Real bad eggs.
Yeah.
And I think, generally speaking, what's going to happen more than likely is that Nicholas Fury knows who she is when he meets her. He knows about missing Air Force pilot Carol Danvers,
Right.
and doesn't tell her until later in the film. I think he's found a link to a case he's been working on.
Very interesting.
For a while.
What an interesting theory.
And I think that's probably going to be how that goes. Some nice little nods and things to that. She doesn't punch old women, odd enough. For anyone who saw the trailer and said, "Oh, Brie Larson, bad egg."
Yeah, punching that old woman. It's funny, isn't it? Because if you know anything about the character, you assume that's a Skrull.
You assume.
But there's no mention of shapeshifting or anything in that trailer. So she punches that old woman square in
There
the
are
jaw.
Skrulls coming out of the water.
Yeah, but
They're on the beach.
Yeah, but you don't know that
Well, they could just be
they're
having a Skrull picnic.
shapeshifty men. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be having a Skrull picnic. The other thing is, interesting, odd thing that's come out of it. When you look at the poster that was released, which is Carol Danvers in the crack of light between two airplane hangar doors.
Yeah.
There's a small cat.
Yeah, it's her cat. It's Carol Danvers' cat, Chewie.
Yeah, it's Carol Danvers' cat, who is in the comics an alien.
He's an alien. Flurkin.
Thank you very, very
And
much.
his name's Chewie.
Yeah, and Rocket Raccoon gives him an old slap and a beat down because he doesn't like them. They're real bad eggs. They literally lay alien eggs out of their mouths and eat anything that comes near them.
Ah, bad luck.
Yeah, so I don't know how that works out in the things, but
I think it's an Easter egg.
it could just be an Easter
It's just
egg.
an Easter egg.
But it's a nice little nod to
I don't
an
think
Easter
there's going to
egg,
be flurkins in the movie.
I love it, flirkin.
Were you disappointed?
That's a flirkin' good time.
Hey! Were you disappointed that she crashed into a blockbuster rather than an Extravision?
Well, to my 90s Irish sensibility, I was like, what is this?
Blockbuster.
What is this? I thought Marvel should at least spend millions into digitally putting an Extravision in there for
They could do it like the Captain America list. In every country, they could do the most popular video rental shop.
Yeah, because a whole video rental store is just as easy as a small list.
Yeah, well, it is. That'd be pretty easy. I could do that.
You probably could, yeah.
Extravision. Just stick that in there. Benjamin.
Yes.
Did you think that someone with Brie Larson's frame could climb those ropes?
No.
Yeah,
I
me
feel
too.
Like you want me to say no. I didn't really pay attention. See, unlike you, Michael, I don't go through life measuring every single person up as to whether I could beat them up or whether I'd have a difficult time.
Well,
by the way, in Michael's scale of one to beat up, there is no losing. He'll never lose.
No.
He just has people he could beat up easily.
Yeah.
Or people he would struggle to beat up but would eventually do.
Yeah, exactly. Would do. Ben, no, there's a single shot. I've watched that trailer so many times. There's a single shot where she's hanging onto a rope.
Yes.
And the rope is swaying a tiny bit, and she's clearly deep in thought about something.
Yeah.
And it's so obvious she's standing on a box.
Oh, really?
Yeah. She's standing on a box and jiggling the rope ever so slightly with her hands. It takes me back to when Gal Gadot was cast as Wonder Woman and everyone said she was too skinny. But then Gal Gadot bulked up.
She did.
And Gal Gadot really looks the part.
She does.
Now, having said that, there's a lot less skin on show for Captain Marvel. You can hide it with the suit.
I'm not certain that's a bad decision. Probably, let's not pander to the lads that want to see Captain Marvel in her Warbird kit.
Yeah, well, that's just a unitard.
It's a unitard with
cleavage.
a sash and a domino mask.
Yeah, and butt cleavage.
And butt cleavage.
And
tons.
Yeah, it's good that the butt cleavage isn't there.
I think that's healthy.
A
lack, not a...
Who do you think Judd Law is playing?
Judd Law, noted 80s actor turned British thespian.
Yeah.
Judd Law.
Yeah.
Judd Law looks good. He's Marvel. No,
that's the thing, isn't it?
Is he? He's been greenlit as.
Is he?
He's bloody evil Captain number 1. He's the one that I think the relationship there is going to be, he takes bloody Brie Larson under his wing. He's kind of the big brother figure, the father figure, the one that taught him the ropes. He turns out to be a real bad bloke.
I don't know, because Marvel is traditionally a heroic character. It wouldn't be the first time they've made a goodie into a boldie.
They don't have to do it. They don't have to do it anymore. The rules are different for the MCU.
Yeah. He could be a different character, though.
He could be, but I'd like to see him as Marvel.
I wouldn't be massively surprised if they wanted to avoid the name Marvel. It's a bit on the nose, isn't it? It's a bit on the nose.
To be fair, he could die at the hands of Thanos at some point in that movie to kind of further her hatred for a Thanos.
Interesting. Or Ronan.
Bloody Ronan.
Are we going to see Ronan go rogue, or is he just going to be a side character?
I think you'll see the roots of Ronan going rogue. I think you'll see the moments where he kind of struggles with whether or not this is the Kree way. And then he'll go off in the deep end. I'm looking forward to seeing
Digimon Hansu.
Thank you, Digimon Hansu, which is not his name.
It is his name.
It's not, no.
It is.
Digimon Hansu. I'm looking forward to seing his character because I quite like him in anything he's in.
He wasn't great in Guardians of the Galaxy, though.
He was gas in Guardians of the Galaxy. He was hilarious.
The only thing I can remember is... Who?
Yeah, but that's what made it so great.
Look, Ben, it looks good. I'm not super excited about it based on the trailer.
He's the writers out of the corner card. That's what the movie is. It's we wrote ourselves into a big bloody apocalyptic narrative, and we need to introduce a character that can just kick Thanos' ass.
I don't know about that, to be honest, because they've already established that Thor can kick his ass.
Yeah,
if need be.
Yeah.
I honestly don't think she's going to be a huge character in Avengers 4. I won't eat my hat.
I think it'd be very lazy if they did make her the central character of Avengers 4.
Well, it'll be Iron Man.
But I kind of I'm enjoying perusing the internet culture that spawned from this, and they have a lot of things, where it's Captain America versus Captain Marvel.
Yeah,
I'm the captain now. Blah blah blah. And you're like,
shut down. It
doesn't make that much of a difference.
A lot of Air Force versus Army as well.
Yeah, they love that.
Get out of here, Americans.
They love that. Bloody Americans.
Yeah, weirdos.
So competitive. They all fight on your behalf in wars that they don't really want to be in.
Oh!
So it's grand. Like, leave them alone.
Ooh.
They all risk their lives for you to sit in your fat ass and watch it on Fox News. Like, it's grand.
Well, Ben, that's really going to help with the American listenership.
Care.
Ben...
I have nothing against the armed forces, by the way. I have a thing against the bloody people sitting on their couch giving out about the armed forces.
Ben...
Quay out of that.
Ben...
What?
Ben,
what?
Have you seen Batman's Dong?
Yes, the childhood dream that I had at a very young age has come to fruition.
Yeah.
And Batman had a penis recently.
Oh, very good.
I think he's always had a penis, but his penis was recently revealed.
Mm-hmm.
I am vengeance. I am the night. I'm about 3 inches soft.
3 inches soft isn't bad. Hold on.
Look, all I'm saying is there was a big feminist kickback. Well, not feminist. No, that's wrong. I take that back. There was
a there and then Ben's retraction.
There and then Ben's. Oh, we have a Ben's retraction.
We do have a Ben's retraction. We'll do that next.
Yeah. No, I take that back. That was wrong. There was a large amount of women that were kind of making the joke of, now that I see what Batman's working with, it's, I understand why he has the big car and drives it into a cave every night. And there were a lot of these jokes. And then I think there's another section of men on the internet going, it's not that small.
Yeah, it's perfectly reasonable.
It's quite interesting to see these people debating a fictional character's penis length.
Why
I
does
quite enjoy it.
Why does he get his ding dong out?
He gets his ding dong out because he was stripping out of the suit. This is part of DC's new Black Label. It's called Batman Damned, and it's a big moody. It's like Marvel Knights, I suppose. But it's
Or Marvel Max.
Yeah, I guess it would be similar to both of those, and it's kind of a combination of the Marvel What Ifs with Marvel Max.
All right.
So DC used to do a line called Elseworlds, which has since fallen off the radar. But I think Black Label is going to be their way to explore all these. So they have the fantastic duo of Ed Brubaker and Lee Bermeo, who does like a really realistic kind of Batman. I really enjoy how he draws him. And in this particular world, no spoilers, Joker dies. It's established right at the start of the thing. And it kind of delves into Batman's history, and it turns out magic has played a much bigger role in Batman's life.
Of course it has.
There's a bloody Constantine, there's a bloody Enchantress. Enchantress takes an interest in Bruce when he's a child.
There's a Willy.
There's a penis. And his father's a bit of a philanderer. Philandering filth flarner. And that's a whole thing. So it's very dark. But it's quite good. It's well written. It's heavy noir, but it's just, Ed Brubaker kind of playing his hand a bit much, showing how much he prefers Batman, saying the lad from Kansas is a wanker. That's Constantine that says that. The lad from Kansas is a wanker. This lad's the real deal. He's tracking Batman after a big injury.
Constantine is?
Yeah. It's a whole thing. Joker's dead, trying to figure out who it is. Turns out there's a big magic force moving against him. It's good. And penis. The penis is just a marketing stunt, to be honest, because it's been retracted already, and the next few editions that are going to be printed of it haven't got it anymore.
What are they going to replace it with?
You buy
a cucumber.
Shadow. To be fair, initially it's a very poor drawing because no.
Let's ask penis expert Ben Cullaby whether it's a good drawing or not.
No. I don't mean it like that. As in, the shadow is placed, or the light source is behind him.
Right.
And for some reason, you can see the outline of his
ding dong,
which doesn't make any sense because
it's a silhouette.
But you see the light refracted on his penis. That's how you know it's a penis.
I doubt the light refracted on his penis.
Penis light refraction, Michael. Just take it easy, Michael. Okay, I've done my research.
All right,
I've done it. But it
doesn't sound terribly scientific to me. But all right.
PLR, penis light refraction. Come on, we've all been to school.
We're gonna get pulled from iTunes for this episode.
Probably.
The voice detection is gonna hurt. Penis, dong, Willy.
Anyway. Down below, lads, let us know. Do you think 3 inches soft is perfectly okay for a man to have, or do you prefer a longer soft length?
Yeah, please don't leave that comment down below, if at all possible. Benjamin, I've been reading comics as well. I didn't have a good week of comics. I was quite disappointed.
Yeah, it was a bit moot for you, Michael. Bit of a moot comic week.
That's not what that word means either. What's gone wrong with you today?
I don't know, I'm kind of broken.
It just wasn't a great week because the biggest disappointment, Ben, was that The Incredible Hulk, no, The Immortal Hulk, which has probably been my favourite comic so far of this year, just turned into a superhero comic.
Yeah, the bloody Avengers turned up. The
Avengers,
style changed.
Yeah, art style change. Avengers showed up. Alpha Flight showed up. They were on a space station. I mean, everything you could want to go wrong went wrong in one issue.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
Look, we won't ditch it, though.
Big reveal at the end. That's my secret, But
I'm always dead.
I'm already dead.
Oh, whatever.
And it's just like,
yeah, very disappointing.
Okay.
Avengers 7 continues to disappoint me by being all set up, no payoff.
Great. I've been trying to keep up with it.
Yeah, it's
not great. I don't like prehistoric Avengers.
Well, Ben, you won't like this because it's all about the prehistoric Avengers. Yeah. It's these writers, Ben. They get a thing in their head that they love. Like Jason Aaron is currently obsessed with the prehistoric Avengers. Yeah. It's creeping into Avengers, it's creeping into Thor.
It's creeping into everything.
It's creeping into everything. In the same way that Jonathan Hickman
expanded the Fantastic Four universe.
Well, aside from that, when he was on Avengers, he basically sidelined the Avengers and made it about his pet characters. Starbrand, Proxima, whatever his name was.
Midnight.
No, not Proxima Midnight. The big yellow guy with the Omega symbol on his chest.
Oh, I don't know who that is.
I can't remember his name. And he made it all about his pet characters. So now Jason Aaron is making all about his pet characters, which seems to be the 1 million year BC Avengers.
The Tumblr version of fan art.
It's very fan arty.
Tumblr Avengers.
Look, Ben, as you know, I don't like retcons that much.
I hate them.
Especially not everything everything is not what it seems. Everything has always existed.
A poor retcon is not to be had on this podcast.
So look,
Michael.
let's get out of there. Ben,
Yeah.
the other big news that we forgot to talk about
Ooh.
was that Veronica Mars is coming back for a new season.
I don't know if we forgot to talk about that.
I
Michael.
fooled you, Ben. Is it in our wheelhouse, Veronica Mars?
It's a pop culture event that was quite significant and shaped a reasonable amount of the generation. Yeah.
Isn't it your levels are very low there?
My levels are very low there. I took a little dip back, I think. So.
It is interesting though that it's the show that refuses to die.
And really should just find a corner and call it a day.
I don't know.
Come on. She's better than that now. She's outgrown that role a million times over. She's great as Eleanor Showstrop in The Bloody Good Place, which is coming back this week.
Of course.
She's a much better character than she was as chirpy little sassy go-getter Veronica Mars.
She wasn't that chirpy, though, to be honest. She was a bit dark. But anyway, I see what you're saying. I think it's going to be interesting because she's well into her 30s now, and they're going to have to address that in the series.
Unless they just go with a Nick Fury style
digital de-aging. The budget of Hulu. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, probably not.
But,
Is it Hulu?
It is Hulu, yeah.
How does Hulu keep getting away with this stuff? Like,
to Disney.
Did we watch stuff on the Hulu?
We can't watch stuff on the Hulu, if you recall. We'd have to fly over to that America. That's how we watched The Runaways.
Yes, because we've never, ever committed an act of piracy or theft.
Well, that time we were in the Caribbean, remember? And we intercepted the Spanish galleon.
That's when we were actual pirates.
Actual pirates, yeah. You are now banned from Somalia.
Yep, and time travelling in general. But, it's good times.
Okay, gotcha. Do you remember the trailer? This is completely off point. Do you remember the trailer for the first season of Legends of Tomorrow?
The one where it made it look like a weird fan film?
Yeah, where Rip Hunter gathered all of the various superheroes on the roof of a building in Los Angeles or something, and they said, "Who are you?" And he said, "Oh, I'm Rip Hunter. I'm from London and the future." It was one of the best lines ever. Anyway, Ben, Joker. Talk about Joker then.
So test footage, promo shots, stuff like that have appeared for the Joker. The Joaquin Phoenix, Robert De Niro, Todd Phillips ensemble. The internet.
Scorsese involved?
Scorsese is the producer.
Oh.
That's what they do with Scorsese now, because they just attach his name to stuff in a producer, and people go, "Oh yeah," and then they realize, "Oh wait, he's not actually directing it." Todd Phillips from The Hangover is directing it.
The Hangover.
Yeah.
Has he ever done dramatic work before?
I'm sure he probably has, but I can't think of it offhand.
You know,
he must have.
In a way, The Hangover is so terrifying and evil that he might be the perfect choice for the Joker. Like, a lot of the characters in The Hangover in the real world are psychopaths.
Yeah, they're serial killers.
Yeah, they're really bad blokes.
Yeah, really bad eggs.
And it's presented as a laugh, but it's not a laugh, really, is it?
No.
So maybe that's what the tack they're going to take with this Joker thing.
But the internet lost their minds. First of all, because his suit's not purple, Michael. Oh my God! Oh!
You alright?
Oh God!
You okay?
Yeah. That's not the way it is in the comics. Said a large group of men.
It's kind of reddish
who forgot
purple.
to shave below their chin. It's reddish purple. But they're losing their minds for no reason. The Joker has worn a multitude of different costumes. He's wearing the yellow shirt that he's famous for, so I don't know what they're moaning about all that much. What they really lost their minds over, Michael, is that he has blue paint on top of his white paint in a traditional American clown-style mask. Now, half the internet lost their minds. The other half lost their minds back at those lads that lost their minds in the first place. And they said, obviously this is an homage to the 1960s Cesar Romero mask that's worn. And then the other guys...
Where are the Irish guys from Black Rock?
Fair enough. Let me see how am I going to flex this one. Okay, I'll try and change it again. Hang on. And then another group of lads from America this time went, "Yeah, if you watch the Nolan films, you'd see that there was an homage there too." That better?
Yeah, it's very good.
A bit better? Yeah, okay, so it is a continuation of that traditional mask, kind of a nod to
it looks like the Nolan mask, I thought.
Yeah, it looks like the Nolan mask.
The mask he wears before he's revealed to be the Joker.
Yeah, because that's the mask that Cesar Romero wore in the bank heist in the 1960s
Is
film
it?
to reveal...
Oh, it's a homage to a homage to a homage.
It's an homage to an homage to an homage. I don't think that's final makeup. I think that's round one.
There are some on-set pictures which look pretty similar.
No, but I think this might be the sequence where he tries out crime and he gets a disfiguring kind of element that comes on. Like it could be his costume for the film. Like, people are forgetting this is a standalone Joker film. Canon does not apply.
Is it though?
I mean, this is the thing. We had an interesting little fun fanboy conspiracy theory on Tuesday.
Did we?
Yeah.
What was it?
Arthur Fleck.
Oh
If you
yeah,
take
Arthur Fleck.
The first name and take the initial, it's Affleck.
It's ridiculous.
It's strange.
Why is his name A. Fleck?
I really enjoyed that. I was like, oh, we found a thread. Follow it.
Why? But I mean, why? Is that just for people like us? Is that like, let's freak out people who record podcasts on a Sunday?
I think so.
Yeah, possibly.
I think so.
Arthur
got my book.
Fleck. Fleck. Doesn't. Where'd they going with that, Ben?
Yeah. So he's Arthur Fleck. He's never had an identity in the comics. If he has had an identity in the comics or the animated series, it's been Jack Napier. So they've already gone away from that. Like, I don't think there's any need to panic over this. Look, this film is going to be... if it is standalone, you've already lost the Joker that you know from the comics. It's just not going to be like that. What I would say is there's an amazing moment in the teaser trailer where Joaquin Phoenix does like a smile, and then the smile drops for a second.
And it's just sad.
He looks really... Not even sad. He looks quite menacing. So I'm tentatively hopeful. See, I've kind of released my angst about this, Michael. I have no interest in being angry at this because it's just a completely different thing to what we're used to. And that's fine.
Like Venom.
And that, yeah, like a Venom. But in so much as the Venom series really doesn't make sense, neither of them make sense without their hero.
Batman, Joker makes more sense without his hero.
Yeah, he's just a big bloody serial
killing clown man.
Yeah,
everyone's scared of clowns.
Everyone is scared of clowns. But people are losing their minds. There's a nice little leaked footage as well from the New York scenes where you see a bit more of his characterization and his physicality. He's quite effeminate in how he moves and talks to people, and very grand and very mystery. So it's quite similar to the Dark Knight Returns version of the Joker in his physicality.
The Heath Ledger one,
and the one who's in the catonic state and then comes out of the catonic state when Batman comes back in the comics.
The comics. Okay.
Yeah. So it could be that kind of effeminate characterization of the Joker.
I think that word is pronounced catatonic.
Is it? Okay, that's fine. Ben's retractions round 2, catatonic. But yeah, it's it's quite interesting to see his physicality. I think it's going to suit quite well.
It looks more Heath Ledger than Jared Leto.
Oh, absolutely. I think they want to steer well clear of the SoundCloud rapper Joker. They don't want that.
Very good. It's I don't know. It's very interesting, isn't it? It's like, why is it even happening? It's amazing that it is happening.
I don't know why it is happening. I remember people were like, let's have him play it. Like the mock-ups, the Boss Logic stuff, they're good mock-ups. I like them. And now seeing him in makeup, I quite like it as a concept. I'm just going to let it go. Like,
here's the thing, Ben. The much maligned Jared Leto Joker.
Yeah.
Cosplayed a lot.
Yeah, because
people like him.
I think a very specific brand of people like him.
Wow.
I'm just saying.
Anyway, Ben, we saw a film.
We did. We went to a film.
Yeah. Which film was that now?
Black 47.
Yes.
Which refers to the summer of 1847.
Oh, the summer.
1747?
1847.
1847, yeah. We paid attention. Which was the famine in Ireland. It was a big old bout of particularly bad famine. The famine, for anybody that's listening outside of the lovely Emerald Isle, maybe over in Dat America.
I think, Ben, I'm not going to interrupt. Well, I am interrupting you, but I'm not going to stop you. I think the famine may well be the most famous thing about Ireland.
Is it?
I think so.
Oh.
But go on anyway.
There was a blight on the L taters. And as you know, an Irishman without potatoes is no Irishman at all. It's a hollow thing.
He's dead.
We bloody die. There's a thing called blight. Blight is a disease that affects potatoes while they're in the ground. It rots them. What happens then is... what happened then? Not what happens then. What happened then was...
Oh, it still exists.
Blight is still a thing?
Yeah. It still exists. We just know more about controlling and maintaining it.
Didn't have it back in the day. Didn't have the scientific resources at hand.
Interestingly, Ben, the National Botanic Garden in Dublin in Glasnevin, they were the first ones to find the blight and discovered that it was a fungus. but they didn't have the resources, or really the populace weren't educated enough to be able to inform them of what was going on.
Oh.
So people knew what was going on, but for the vast majority of people, it was just the potatoes all died and turned black.
Yeah.
And the stink.
Was it on Boladh?
Mm-hmm.
Agus and Boladh.
Agus on Boladh.
But yeah, that's the name of the episode, by the way. But yeah, generally speaking, quite a terrible event in our history. We went from a roughly 8 million person populace through emigration, starvation, and death to a bloody 4 million
and reduced birth rates.
Population and reduced birth rates. We have never recovered. We are currently standing at about 6 million on the entire island.
Yeah.
We have never recovered from the events of the famine.
Only country in Europe, apparently, to have a lower population now than 200 years ago. Yeah.
There you go.
Although, I mean, pretty well fed now.
So yeah, we are. We do all right now.
Pretty well fed now,
right now.
to the extent that director Lance Daly struggled to find extras
that were gone.
Yeah, he couldn't find
bloody well-nutritioned, well-fed children.
He couldn't find extras who were gaunt enough to play famine victims. Yeah,
that's gas.
Yeah.
Yeah, but generally speaking, the major kind of knock-on to come out of this is the British, who were then occupying the country.
Real boldies.
Real bad eggs at the time. Then began to restrict grain. And basically, when you were Irish back in the day, you were Catholic, you were Irish, and you basically lived in indentured servitude on land that had belonged to you but didn't belong to you anymore and now belonged to the British. Anything that
it belonged to you. The British didn't come and take the land away from the farmers.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, hundreds of generations and generations and generations before they did, but they didn't come and take your land and make you work it, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, fair enough.
This was an inherited system.
Yeah, so we had been in indentured servitude for quite a while.
Yeah.
And then basically anything that you reaped and sowed on that land went to your local landlord, who would then ship it off to the bloody Brits, in their fucking wars in different fucking places.
Welcome to Nationalism, the podcast. Very good. Okay.
Yeah. So if Jerry Adams would like to sponsor the podcast, let's know down below.
Very good.
Yeah. Generally speaking, it was a very dark time in Irish history, and they finally made a movie about it. Finally. Because they hadn't been doing that.
We've had a few historical Irish films. The most popular, recently voted the most popular Irish film in Ireland, Michael Collins. Oh. But that's set 70 odd years later. The Wind, the Shake, the Barley.
Classic.
Very good film, Ben.
Cillian Murphy with some sharp cheekbones.
Yeah.
Sharp cheekbones.
Very sharp cheekbones. Very short. Notably short actor Cillian Murphy.
Notably excellent actor Cillian Murphy.
Excellently short. That's set in the 20s, isn't it?
Is it?
Isn't that set during the War of Independence?
The War of Independence, after 1916.
This is the first ever... we definitely had famine films, because I watched famine films in primary school. Yeah.
I didn't.
We watched them as if to really strengthen our national pride.
About some salt and some wounds.
Yeah. It really made us...
fired up.
Really strengthened how much we hated the British. But this is the first kind of cinematic Hollywood...
Grand scope.
Yeah. It's made €1 million in ticket sales.
That's not bad.
In Ireland. That's practically unheard of.
How much did they pay?
How much did it cost to make it? I think about $1.5 million.
Oh, okay.
So it's almost made its money back in Ireland alone, which is almost unheard of. I'd say that's probably how much Infinity War made in Ireland.
That's good. Well, I think one of the interesting things for us, I think, doing a scan of the room when we went to see it in the cinema.
Well,
a lot of old people.
Elwins, I believe, is the word you used.
Yeah, a lot of
Ben, we did go to see it at 1:00 on a Tuesday, though.
No, but still, apparently that's a key demographic in much of the sales is that there's a lot of old people that want to go see the famine on screen.
Well, here's the thing. Let's say you're 85 now, right?
Yeah.
Your grandparents wouldn't have lived through the famine.
Yeah, but
if you're 85 now, you would have been born in the 40s.
But their grandparents would have lived through the famine, and their parents probably would have lived through the famine.
I'd say their great-grandparents, it's too soon.
Too short,
We're looking at great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents. But, they might have... They're a lot closer to it.
They were a lot closer
than
to
we
it
are.
than that. They would have lived through the Troubles a lot more than we would. So
That's true.
That anti-British sentiment would probably strike more of a chord.
And I was talking there about the tans, Ben, and the tans, of course, are from
you introduced me as a tan.
the black and tans, and a lot of the hatred for the black and tans is in this film, without them being
black and tans.
Because black and tans happened a lot later historically.
Yeah, but there's there's an analog in there that you can draw comparisons between.
Yeah. Someone in our screen did shout, "You tan bastards!" No, it was me, but
it was Michael. Michael spent much of his film giving the middle finger to anyone that came on with a slightly British accent.
Yeah. Now, Ben, give us a very brief. Now, don't spoil it, but tell us what's the story of the film.
Main character.
Yeah,
Martin Feeney.
Yeah, Martin Feeney. That's Martin Feeney in English.
Martin Feeney, to the rest of you, a nice little nod to Fenian, if you're looking for that. Returns from service with the British military in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
He is a deserter, done run away.
Yeah.
Not because he was a coward, because he was sick of the killing.
Sick of the killing.
Comes back to a country that's been utterly decimated through potato blight and then strategic chokeholding of resources. Came back, Mammy's gone, brother's gone.
Yeah.
Sister-in-law's still alive.
Yes, very attractive.
With three little ones.
Suspiciously attractive for a famine victim.
Attractive famine peasant.
Yeah.
Sarah Green. Comes back. Nothing left to fight for.
Yeah.
Bloody sees some houses getting tumbled. Bloody sees some more
some injustices.
Some bloody coin collectors. Coin is tax in the El Gaelic. Coin collectors coming around. And just making things really, really hard for the Irish.
Yeah. So he does a revenge.
Some stuff happens that we can't spoil.
Yeah.
And it becomes Liam Neeson in the famine.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Liam Neeson in the famine.
Yeah, just a lot of staring.
A lot of intense staring. I would say the main actor who plays Martin Feeney probably got the role based on how uncomfortable he made the casting agents in the room.
Yeah.
He has a lot of presence for a man with a glower.
He's Australian.
Does
a fine Irish accent.
Does a fantastic. Speaks the Gaelic awful good for an Aussie.
Yeah. Now that's not too hard because you know there's not a lot of dialogue in this film.
No,
it's not a dialogue heavy movie.
But I found it interesting that Hugo Weaving, Australian,
yeah,
played an Englishman.
Yeah.
And what's his name?
Freshville.
Fresh.
That's how you pronounce it.
Freshville is also Australian, so it's a very Australian heavy movie.
You have an Australian playing an Englishman.
Yeah.
You have an Australian playing an Irishman.
Yeah.
And you have an Irishman playing an Englishman.
Yeah. It's very confusing.
And you have an Irishman playing an Irishman.
You have an Irishman playing an Irishman. You have the Irishman playing the Irishman.
Stephen
Ray,
whatever.
Rhea.
I think he says Ree.
I think I couldn't tell you.
Ray.
Yeah, it's a really interesting film. I think the two key characters there are Feeney and the Inspector. The Inspector, turns out they were, well, it doesn't matter. But
I don't think that's a spoiler.
They served in Afghanistan together.
Because that's why Hugo Weaving's character, the Inspector, is sent after him.
Yeah.
We find that out in the opening.
Yeah, you find that out in the opening. They serve together. And basically he's sent to hunt down this rogue Irishman who's killing constabularies. It's very interesting. Hugo Weaving, I think it's more of a Hugo Weaving movie, kind of redemption movie, than it is Martin Feeney's redemption movie.
Because we see Martin Feeney at the beginning and we see quite a bit of his motivation to go on a killing spree, but then he becomes the kind of it's hard to say.
Yeah, he's very much, again, it's a Mad Max kind of thing where the story centers around him, but he's not necessarily the center of the story. And it's interesting for that reason. I enjoyed it, Michael. I think somebody else, I think it was you who said for what it was grand.
Yeah, I mean, low budget.
Grand.
A couple of million to make. Yeah. Some real dodgy CGI. The couple of buildings which so clearly didn't exist.
A lot of matte painting.
Yeah, and the smoke from the train was one of the most unrealistic things I've ever seen. But, I was told it's basically Rambo. Rambo in the Irish famine.
Yeah, it wasn't.
I think that's more of a misunderstanding of Rambo than what this film is.
Yeah, fair.
Because in Rambo, in First Blood, he doesn't want to hurt anyone. He just wants to be left alone. He has post-traumatic stress disorder and he wants to be left alone. Whereas this is about a guy who does a revenge.
Who actively goes out. And
he goes on a rampage.
Yeah, goes on a bloody rampage. Very Western. I like that. It reminded me an awful lot of the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. It reminded me a lot of The Proposition. Both Australian kind of base things, with a lot of Australian influence. The Proposition especially is another thing. It's set in one of the penal colonies in Australia, and it's a Western. That's a
peanut colony?
To those. A penal colony.
Where they grow peanuts?
Yes. A peanut colony.
Oh, very good.
I thought you were going to make a different kind of joke there, Michael.
No. Like a Batman joke.
No.
Benjamin.
Yes.
I've forgotten what I was going to say. No, it's gone. Completely gone. Did you think that it was like a Western because there's lots of tracking around on horseback and wild open spaces?
They like the wild open spaces.
But it's like a muddy Western.
Yeah, it's a cold, wet Western.
Talk about Stephen Rea's character.
So you made a very good observation, Michael,
thanks,
as we
Ben.
came out of the cinema. Well, there's no point in me taking credit for it, Michael. But Stephen Rea's character is very much kind of like a magical realism element. To the
magical
realism. Film. I did some research, Michael. I took this on board. So magical realism is a slight twist to the story where a slightly magical character enters into the story and affects it in different ways. Not outrageously, like they don't reshape reality or anything like that, but they subtly influence the story in a less than realistic way.
Although he doesn't do anything magical. He doesn't do anything overtly
magical, but there are a couple of moments. He appears out of nowhere, speaks perfect English, which would not have been as common in the small rural towns that he was visiting. And he refers to other Irish people as they. He very rarely counts himself among Irish people.
Now, I just want to say, Ben, before we go any further on this is not it's not a fantasy film.
No, not at all.
This is a kind of subtextual reading of it.
I think this is a stretch, but it's a good stretch. Like the one you get in yoga on
like
Tuesday
a hamstring.
Evenings. Yeah, it's flexing some stuff.
Sorry, I'm kicking you there.
Kicking me under the table, doing a hamstring stretch. What Stephen Ray really becomes is a Shanachie, and a Shanachie is an all Irish storyteller. They're men who were trained in an oral tradition.
Yeah, very good. By Batman.
To memorize and tell the stories of our culture. That's what they do. It's why Irish mythology, Irish culture, Irish storytelling hasn't really survived as well, because it was an oral tradition. Okay? Yeah, I knew you were just going to have a giggle. But Stephen Ray becomes kind of almost like a leprechaun.
Right. But it's not a fantasy leprechaun.
It's not. He's the only one in the village who speaks
the Boladh.
The Boladh. And he speaks it excellently. He speaks it perfectly. He works for coin, which is a traditional thing that leprechauns kind of do. Not that anybody wouldn't have done that at the time.
He has a lot of knowledge that the other main characters in the film don't have.
He sings old Irish songs and he goes traveling around. The interesting thing for me is, so there are two events that stick out to me that kind of speak to his outside status, and the normal rules don't apply to him. He's quite well fed. When we meet him.
Yeah,
that's the
true.
first thing.
Yeah.
He's not gaunt, he's not poor. His clothes are very clean. When we meet him, he's a bit of scruff, but he's not rolling around in the mud.
He's even in that kind of Loki-esque pose of reclining in a chair with his legs crossed.
And nobody else seems to pay that much attention to him. And the second thing is, he sings songs all through the thing, very irritating songs.
Yeah, he's very annoying.
Traditionally, Captain Pope is the main British antagonist that we get to know throughout the film.
English Jake Busey.
English Jake Busey. He doesn't punish him for this, or tell him to shut up, or do anything. He's never punished for singing his strange songs.
That's true, actually.
As he goes along. He has a lot of influence over their decisions. He seems to understand the landscape very well.
He even, for some reason, manages to get the ear of the English Lord.
That's the next part that I'm going to say.
Oh, sorry.
We find when the English Lord is in the hotel, he is very comfortably up and chatting with him at the fire. Not only that, he makes a really aggressive...
Jim Broadbent!
He makes you really enjoy being a bastard English landlord.
A real boldy.
He had a lot of fun playing that role by the looks of things. But he makes this really interesting point about how, if you took an English woman and made her live in poverty, filth, and all this kind of thing, they would look at... He argues with the Lord. A Lord who traditionally has no patience for that.
Yeah.
By other things, and he gets away with it, and there's no harm. He's also instrumental by the end of the film, and he seems to get away consequence-free quite a lot. So he seems to just be able to slip through the story quite easily, like an Irish eel. So he's a really fascinating character in that. He's kind of like an analogy for the fairy folk, in that they exist. There are no consequences for them as creatures, and they influence stories subtly, and they play a lot of tricks and stuff like that. He doesn't necessarily play tricks in the same sense, but he's awful wise for an Irish president.
And we'd never actually learn anything about him.
Nope. He's just there to witness. Yeah. And he says it himself. When he's given the chance to leave the story, he goes, "No, if it's all the same to you, I'll stay. Around, I'd like to see this story to its conclusion, to see that it's properly told." So he's almost like a witness. Yeah, but
he's my favorite character in it.
Imagine he's the best character in it, I think, for sure, by a mile. Yeah, by a mile.
So Ben, are there any other examples of this kind of, what would we call this? Was this a historical drama? It's not really a drama, is it?
This is a revenge fantasy, Michael. It's historical fiction. It's traditionally how we look at it.
Go on.
So yeah, I was doing a little bit of research on this. Historical fiction is rife throughout popular culture.
Go on.
We love a bit of historical fiction, and I was trying to find the reason for this. And one of the key writers of historical fiction in a literary form is Hilary Mantel.
Never heard of him or her.
Hilary Mantel wrote a bunch of novels about King Edward VIII's court, Tudors, that kind of thing. Henry VIII, sorry. Edward VIII, no. Henry VIII's court in Tudor times.
I like how we've reached a level of cooperation here where I can tell you've made a mistake with simply my face.
It's Henry VIII, my apologies. And the Tudor court, and she writes these kind of things. She has an interesting point in it. When we want to understand the past, we go to science, we go to history, objective, factual accounts. When we want to be moved by the past, or when we want to drive a message home, we turn to historical fiction. Now, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that.
Right.
But I then went on from that.
What message was this film trying to drive home? Them English are a bunch of bastards.
English are a bunch of bastards. I don't think that's an uncommon way of looking at that film. And furthermore, I think that's how it's been received. It's been quite divisive in terms of the Irish love it because it's an Irish thing, and we love an old pat in the back for an Irish achievement. Do you know what I mean? That's why I actually patted myself in the back.
You did, yeah.
So that's a whole thing, and it is kind of a difficult thing. If you look at regular user reviews on something like Rotten Tomatoes or something like that, a lot of English people are quite offended by this film. You see comments like, "How dare you portray us like this? This is how we were." You go take a look at the Rotten Tomatoes website.
Okay.
We might include a link to the actual thing down below.
Right.
It's interesting to see. It's obviously struck a chord in an interesting way, and that's an interesting thing to see.
You just said interesting 4 times.
Did I? That's a fascinating thing to see.
Very good.
From historical fiction. So this point has been made by Hilary Mantel, and I then looked into more of it, and a great many educational companies like Scholastic and things like that believe in historical fiction, giving especially children an impetus to learn more because it engages you more with that story.
So you think that this film, you think this film is going to be shown in Irish primary schools for years to come?
Probably not this film, but you would see it in other examples. I mean, we see it throughout pop culture all over the place. So I was doing a little bit of analysis, Michael.
Right.
I've broken it into 3 main reasons for using a bit of historical fiction.
Can't spell analysis without anal.
So, I've broken it into 3 different sections, Michael, and we can take a look at them under these. So, one of the main reasons we write historical fiction, in my opinion, is to fill the gaps.
Right.
To solve an old mystery that we have. Another reason we do it is to criticize an attitude at that time.
Yeah.
And another reason we do it is revenge fantasy. So there are 3 possible ways of looking at it. We can use it as a lens, which would be criticism. We can use it to kind of give a little bit of extra backstory to a mystery. And we use it quite often these days as revenge fantasy.
So is the first one why Jack the Ripper is so popular?
Jack the Ripper, well, there's a great example.
Thanks, Ben.
He was one of life's great, Victorian London's great mysteries, which was recently solved. But
was it?
Oh yeah, they found out who it was through DNA analysis. We know who Jack the Ripper was now.
Who was it?
Bloody Polish immigrant.
What?
Yeah.
That sounds racist.
That's awful, isn't it?
Huh.
Yeah. So it's a bit depressing, really.
Hold on, I'm gonna investigate this.
Yeah, take a look.
I will.
No problem. I don't mind. But his myth has endeared. We've seen multiple kind of renditions of who Jack the Ripper might have been. In Alan Moore's From Hell, it was a famous English nobleman. Dr.
Nobleman.
Aspiring nobleman. Any other examples there?
Jack the Ripper? I can't think of any Jack the Rippers off the top of my head. Just From Hell is the one that stands out.
Yeah, From Hell is the one that stands out. So that was a big... but I mean, you can take a look at lots of different examples. When we're filling in the gaps, we love to kind of add that there might have been a hidden thing behind the door that we never got to understand. Government cover-ups are a big one.
Yeah. Ares being responsible for the First World War.
Ares being responsible for the First World War. Something like that. The hatred of men, blah, blah. And, American Vampire is a series from Vertigo. And it turns out that vampires have orchestrated various things throughout the years. I'm not saying these are good examples, but these are examples where people love to slot in kind of a very fictional element and kind of explain a mystery. It also helps to kind of flesh out a story that we don't really understand. One series that stood out to me big time for that was Da Vinci's Demons.
Heard of it, never seen it.
It's a terrible show. Don't worry about it. But became very popular with the Tumblers.
Of course.
Because he's a very suave, energetic, very much like Sherlock with social skills in Renaissance Italy. Okay, so he's a big, suave, kind of Jack Sparrow-style inventor. And Leonardo da Vinci probably wasn't like that.
No. It
was said that he was quite a recluse and didn't really spend his time with people and he was the kind of man who forgot to eat. As in, he was obsessed with just spending all his time in his workshop. So this kind of big, flash version of him didn't exist. But people seem to enjoy relating, very famous men or women to very charming men or women. And we see that throughout different accounts. The one, I think, that's more useful is how we use it as criticism on occasion. So I think one great example of that is Captain America. Captain America is a form of historical fiction in a really strong sense.
Yeah.
And I think the Ultimate Universe used them to great effect to criticize the modern world versus, the ideals that he fought for in 1945.
Go on.
When Captain America comes back in the Ultimate Universe, he's kind of disgusted with the 21st century.
Yeah.
Not necessarily from the point of view of where it's going, but from a moral point of view, he feels that the standards that men used to uphold have completely dropped or vanished, or and he's come back to a world that really doesn't at all suit what he pictured the world would be when they won World War II. I think that's really interesting. That they use that to criticize kind of certain values today, not necessarily all the time, but Captain America stayed a soldier in the Ultimate Universe. He usually followed orders and did what a soldier does. He followed those orders, and I think it's interesting to see how he's such a glorified character in the Marvel Universe, kind of, American liberty and stuff like that. But in the Ultimate Universe, he's a soldier, first and foremost. And he usually doesn't question his task unless it's completely off-brand. But we wouldn't have had the Winter Soldier without that Ultimate Universe where modern espionage and modern tactics in modern military reconnaissance and stuff like that were criticized. So I think it's really interesting that they use an old character who is historical fiction by nature to kind of refract the lens a little bit. And then sticking with World War II, in the third category there of revenge fantasy, we have Inglorious Bastards, which I think is the most in-your-face form of outrageous historical fiction that I've ever seen.
Except for a lot of comic books.
Comic books notwithstanding, but in really popular culture, something that everyone has kind of seen. Were you trying to catch your flex on Mike there?
No, yes, I'm stiff. My neck is stiff. Go on.
So
comic books are usually a bit wilder.
Well, comic books can be as wild as they like, because they're not as widespread either. But Inglorious Bastards completely rewrote the death of Hitler.
Yeah. It was brilliant.
It was actually a group of Jewish soldiers
that
killed him.
Inglorious Bastards' real contribution to popular culture is that interrogation scene in the bar.
Oh, it's great.
That's one of the best film scenes ever filmed.
Great.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's complete revenge fantasy.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And I think one of the criticisms that's leveled against historical fiction in that regard is that it can really detract from the men and women who actually gave to that cause. One of the smart things that Marvel did with Captain America is they removed him before D-Day. Captain America could never take part in something like D-Day because Captain America would probably end up leading D-Day.
Yeah.
That would be awful.
Yeah, because then all the people who really died.
Detract from the real men and women who fought in that war.
I suppose that's the good thing about Iron Man. Iron Man didn't win Vietnam.
No.
He was a kind of inconsequential side note of Vietnam.
And
or Iraq. Or Afghanistan. Whatever you need to update him.
When you're playing with historical fiction, you have to be very careful not to cross that line. Inglorious Bastards took this and said, fuck it.
Fuck it.
Inglorious Bastards removed any hint of a long game. It was just a bunch of guys that broke into a cinema. One of them actually gets to shoot Hitler when he tries to leave a room. Like, Hitler doesn't die in the fire.
No, he just gets shot to death.
He gets shot to death by a Jewish person, and then
is it the bear Jew that gets him?
The bear Jew gets him in the end, but he gets the bear Jew. Like, they kill each other.
Oh, do they?
It's this weird moment, and I think there can be a very disrespectful element to historical fiction as well, in that if you create a character that has too much influence, you're actually taking away from a legacy that some people probably feel quite strongly about. Like, World War II was not that long ago.
Neither was the famine. I suppose Lord Kilmichael was entirely fictional.
Probably not. You'll find there probably was a Kilmichael somewhere. But, again, Jim Broadbent played that with a kind of relish. He really enjoyed being this big bastard kind of character, and he was really good at it. Like, he was a very hateable, kind of silly at times, but very hateable character
for essentially a cameo.
But it's quite interesting how you do. Oh man, we're way over time. I'm so sorry. The last one that I'd say in terms of criticism, because you brought it up when I pitched this idea, Cassidy from Preacher is a great way that Garth Ennis looks at the 1916 Rising.
Yeah.
Very often when Cassidy the vampire was a soldier in 1916 called Pruntius.
It was I just flicked open this copy here. It was so weird seeing Tulip White.
Yeah, she's losing naked now. And it's interesting because a lot of the rhetoric that we have as Irish people is that 1916 was this grand ideal.
Oh, that's speak for yourself, Ben.
Everyone was on board with... No, but the one that we get sold more often than not was that the whole country united. But when you look at the history, it was quite a divisive movement. And it did trick a lot of young men into giving up their lives. And Cassidy is one of those young men who kind of realizes the hypocrisy of what they're doing at one point. So it can also have an interesting effect and question something that we take as verbatim. So it really
that was
depends.
written by someone from Belfast as well.
Yeah, exactly. So he's a northern guy. But it doesn't necessarily mean his opinion is wrong. It is a fictional... The best thing about historical fiction is, at the end of the day, you can just step back and go, look, guys, it's fiction.
It's a story.
So you can push the envelope a little bit without there being massive consequences.
But Cassidy is a good example of what you said, actually. Like, you could easily slot him into the real story, and then he disappears, he deserts, doesn't he? He deserts, and he gets bitten by a vampire while he's dying in a ditch. But... the story goes on without him. He doesn't lead the rebellion to victory.
He's not a hero.
Like
he's a side note. Yeah. Historical fiction works best when your historically fictional character is a side note.
Or you're just bombastic about it, like Inglorious Bastards.
Or you just throw out. But to be fair, subtlety has never been Tarantino's finest hour. Listen, if you have any favourite historical fictions, if you have any kind of comic, film, TV adaptation that you liked that kind of looked at something, especially from your own country's history, if you're not from Ireland or if you're not from America or something like that, from your own country's history, please, we'd love to know more about it. Let us know down below. We are, as always, on Instagram. We are on Facebook.
At Mick and Ben.
At Mick and Ben. We are on Twitter. And most importantly, we are on iTunes. If you could give us a look on iTunes and give us an hour.
We're not on Spotify, though.
We're not on Spotify.
SoundCloud, you bunch of bastards.
We're working on it. Join us next week where we talk about our burgeoning career as SoundCloud rappers. We're about to go get our first
very good. Ben,
today.
Also, don't forget to tell everyone that next week you're going to be away.
Oh, yeah. I am returning to Florence as of tomorrow.
Yes.
You'll be listening to this and I will be on a plane. So our next one will be from the Digital Tiny Room.
Back to the digital. It's actually going to be called the Digital Tiny Room.
Oh, excellent. It just keeps growing. It just keeps growing. So we will see you all next week, and I will see Michael through a monitor.
Yes.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. I thought that was good. Might leave that in.